which must have cost a lot to him in time, in finances, in struggle, in strife, and then only eventually to get speared to death. Hello, today I'm going to be talking about the cost of faith. I've been reading this book for quite a while. It's not very thick, but for some reason I keep dropping it and coming back to it, dipping in and out of it. But I was looking at it the other day and I came across a passage in chapter 4, the Passion of the Christ and the Persecution of Christians. And I was really struck by what a lot of people went through. And it got me to thinking about what the cost is for that. What's the cost of Gnosis? And you go through your life and there's all kinds of costs to everything. Your groceries, cost to your body if you don't work out or if you work out too much. There are costs to everything. But I think this is maybe the highest cost, or it has the potential for that. If you look into history, you see that it's not just about death. That's not just the cost. The cost is immeasurable pain and suffering on top of death, some kind of brutality. It's just horrific, really. And I'm not just referring to tortures, things like that. I did a video about the Thomasines, and Thomas traveled very, very far, which must have cost a lot to him in time, in finances, in struggle, in strife, and then only eventually to get speared to death because of his missionary ways. So I'm going to talk about the price of this in relation to heresies, inquisitions, martyrdoms, assassinations, etc. I'm going to touch on the fate of the 12 apostles, some Gnostic sects, and some mystics in the modern world, the terms. So I think there are two terms that are relevant here that we need to examine a little bit closer before we get into this. The first is martyr, which comes from the Greek martis, which means witness. Originally, it meant someone who bears witness to a fact or truth. By the 2nd century, someone who witnessed their faith through suffering or death was called a martyr. So there was this shift in nuance from witness to one who dies for belief. It elevates suffering itself as a moral proof. Heresy comes from the Greek heresis, which means choice, faction, school of thought. Originally choosing one philosophical or religious path over another. Early church writers used it as a belief or teaching contrary to orthodoxy. So again, there's a shift in nuance from the neutral school or choice to the pejorative deviation from truth. Reminds me a little bit of the term conspiracy theory in the modern world. But it labels intellectual diversity as dangerous, corrupt, or evil. But with these two ideas in mind, let's get into the death and destruction. Christian apostles, deaths, and persecutions. So the most obvious and famous death is obviously Jesus Christ. Death by crucifixion, but in some ways, I think he had it easy compared to others. When you look into the fates of the 12 apostles, they are quite horrific and very eye-opening. Some of these claims are historically more sound than others, so keep that in mind. But as you can see, they were killed by sword or spear, crucified, beheaded, stoned to death, dipped in boiling oil. Except for John of Patmos, they all met horrific deaths. He's the only one that survived, but he was exiled. They were flayed alive, speared, clubbed, or axed to death, sawed in half sometimes. Judas did self-death by hanging, and I think he got off easy, actually, at least physically. We don't know about his soul. He was replaced by Matthias as the 12th apostle, and he was also persecuted, as well as the evangelists. As you can see here, not good as far as all of these deaths are meant to cause as much pain as possible to some degree. And there were also many prophets from apocryphal texts like Isaiah and Zechariah, John the Baptist, so many that I'm not even gonna list them all here, but there were many. And in most of these instances, they were asked to recant, but they didn't. And I think that's kind of fascinating because I don't know many people in life, maybe this is sad, I'm not sure, but I don't know many people in life that would stick to their conviction that strongly. I suppose this proves that faith is unshakable. And I'm not certain what I would do in their situation. I don't know. Worldly powers can't destroy the divine spark once someone is aware of its existence. They had warnings, don't start believing this nonsense or you'll see what happens. You better follow the emperor's edict. Return to your senses. They were often scapegoated during unrest. Local governors often decided to make an example of them. Around 100 CE, perhaps 50,000 to 100,000 adherents empire-wide were made examples of, and that number increased with subsequent emperors. It shows incredible stakes. Religion could get you killed at that time. Gnostic and heretical sects, massacres of eradication. Once the institution of Christianity gained state power, they had to snuff out any other variations in the interpretations of the teachings of Jesus. Pluralism is incompatible with institutional power. Orthodoxy creates legitimacy, but heresy creates enemies. When you think of power, there are some things that it needs. A clear inside and outside, a way to identify loyalty. Heresy solved these problems. It defined who was in. It justified coercion against those who were out. And many Gnostic sects were eliminated. I have a Gnostic sects playlist. You can check that out if you want to get more detail on these stories. Their texts were suppressed or destroyed. Their churches confiscated. There was exile. There were inquisitions, which contained executions, book burnings, forced conversions. Mani, the founder of Manichaeism, himself was imprisoned and then probably flayed and killed. But this just went on and on. It's almost hard to fathom considering the religious freedom we have today. But the Cathars had tens of thousands slaughtered. Arnaud Almeric said, "Kill them all, God will know his own." And he was referring to the entire city. Women, children, innocent or guilty, it didn't matter. Many of the survivors were burned alive by the Inquisition. There were entire spiritual cultures annihilated over and over again. The Bogomils were declared heretical by the Byzantine Church. The Paulicians were branded heretics. These are just some of the prominent groups, but there were like 50 to 100 Gnostic sects that went through similar things. But it didn't end there. That was just the beginning. Medieval mystics, priests, nuns, punishments for too much God. Even if you were within the orders, sometimes you were persecuted. Often if you felt too much spirituality. Here are some notable instances. Many of these people were burned. Besides them, others were just imprisoned, silenced, or harassed, or sometimes exiled. There were investigations. This is the whole reason why alchemy was invented, was to code all this and secret code. But looking at all this, it seems like mysticism is only tolerated when it reinforces hierarchy. If one strays too far from the narrow lane, bad things seem to happen. Modern or early modern dangerous knowers. Once we get into the modern world, the pattern continues. Although it seems to be more about these kind of covert assassinations or silencing groups. Modern laws have made it more difficult to just outright kill people in cold blood, but it still happens, it's just a little more subtle. Here are some that were banned or marginalized, exiled, imprisoned. And as you can see, the harassments haven't really ended, and they probably never will. I just did a video recently in my insider circle where I talk about lawful evil. Lawful evil always goes after nous. It always goes after gnosis. It always goes after the divine mind. You can't have it running wild if you want to maintain control. To be unreservedly spiritual, one almost has to be an anarchist. It's almost required. And the lawful evil system will try to put that out, through censorship, defamation, exile, like I said, trying to trap people in different cons. There are modern Gnostic or alternative Christian groups that are harassed, attacked, or expelled. In the last decade, people have persecuted religious leaders in different ways. I'm not going to go into the specifics of all these, but it is happening in real time with all religions. Even in the last few months, there is the assassination of Charlie Kirk. However, you see the man. There's definitely a conspiracy around his assassination. You can see what's happening with the morphing of Turning Point USA away from his original message. The lawful evil is creeping in to claim it. Shootings in churches and mosques, disruptions of services in the name of political ideologies. There are also slow assassinations, like the mystic Osho, who was imprisoned by the US. He's a controversial figure, but a lot of religious leaders are. His followers had allegations of thallium or radiation exposure while he was held in US custody in 1985. His health declined immediately after this imprisonment and then his deportation, and he eventually died of heart failure in India. Before that, he was in strapping good health. What this actually shows: Gnosis threatens order. Institutions tolerate mysticism only when it obeys their commands. If you want independent access to God, you almost have to put yourself into political danger or anarchism. And they use heresy as a retroactive justification. Church institutions preserve orthodoxy by eliminating alternatives, not defeating them, not defeating their ideas. But I'm going to leave you with one question to ponder. Are you willing to endure these kind of horrors for your beliefs? Give your thoughts below. I really want to know. It's a question I think about often, and I also think about what I would do in that situation. After what happened in 2020, 2021, I tend to think I would probably die for my beliefs. But it's hard to say when it's like right there in front of you. But give me your thoughts below. That's all I got for today. Take care. Have a good day.